you kind of put yourself more in a box when you don't know about it, because then you're going to have these knee-jerk reactions that actually are not necessarily the best reaction in any given situation. We want to make the most prudent response to a situation, which may not be what our temperament kind of dictates.
You guys, do you ever have those moments where you just take a look around at your life and you're like, how is something so marvelous happening to me right now? I can't believe it. I can't believe this is happening. That is the feeling I have right this second. I gave my yes to the Lord a few years ago to talk about discerning marriage, this passion I have. It blossomed and ballooned into something bigger than I could have imagined. And now I'm sitting here with the authors of one of the top 5 books that changed my entire life. And I can't believe it. I'm going to try not to be really gushy about it. But you guys, I am joined by Art and Laraine Bennett, who wrote the book, The Temperament God Gave You. Welcome to the podcast, Art and Laraine.
Oh, thank you so much. That's wonderful. That's the best introduction ever.
Y'all. Okay, so I'm going to give the audience a little bit of my own history with this book, and then we'll dive in. So most of you have probably heard about it, honestly. This is, in my experience, the premier book on the temperaments. So probably you've heard about it. If you haven't, we will make sure that you get comfortable with the idea as we're going through this interview, because it's an important concept. But when I was 18 years old, we had a guest speaker come to my university and present on the temperament God gave you. She happened to be the vocations director of an order that I then was convinced I was called to join because I had such a life-changing experience at this conference she put on. Clearly I'm called to marriage, but it was quite the road to get there. And she introduced the temperaments. I'd never heard of them before. And I have a very loud, very bubbly, very social personality that for a lot of my life I had been told was a problem. Here all, if someone was correcting me or someone was saying something about me, typically it had something to do with my boisterous personality. And there was something to the fact that I needed to build some virtue, right? But it was when this book with the sister, Joseph Andrew, introduced this concept of a sanguine personality, or sanguine temperament is what it's called. It was revolutionary for me that this wasn't something that was wrong with me. This was a gift that the Lord gave me, and it was my responsibility to cultivate it in a way that was appropriate. But it was a powerful, powerful moment for me to realize that this is just a gift that the Lord gave me, and it's my responsibility to go from there and cultivate it. But it wasn't something wrong with me. So y'all, I cannot overstate how incredible it was to encounter your work and your books. So for my own life, it was powerful and wonderful. But then in my personal relationships, it was great. My husband is very melancholic, which, is the opposite of sanguine, which I learned from your book, which we'll talk about. So it's been very helpful to know that about him and him to know that about me so that we can love each other well. We say all the time, my tagline is, it's only fun if everyone's having fun, which I learned from you. And it's very typical of my sanguine personality, the opposite of my husband. And also in my work with couples, this is one of the 3 things that I tell them when you're trying to figure out how to know who you are and how to love your beloved well. Figure out the temperaments, yours and theirs. And now I'm parenting kiddos. I have a very choleric child, and that's actually, you can probably tell me if it's choleric or choleric. There's this, what is it? How do you say it?
It's both. Oh. Either one you want. Yeah. Because, I actually looked it up before one of these podcast interviews, and it said equally divided. Some people say choleric, some people say choleric.
Well, good to know. Thank you. Well, anyway, I have one of those on my hands. Yeah. And the Temperament God Gave Your Kids book has been great. It's just, so great. Anyway, so I'm gushing. For those who either don't know you or did not realize that you guys were the faces behind this powerful work, can you give me a little introduction to yourself, how you got involved in the temperaments, and then explain what they are and what the 4 are for my people who maybe don't know?
Well, just really briefly, so Art was practicing as a marriage and family therapist in a Catholic organization. He had co-founded a Catholic clinic and several clinics in this area. And I happened to be reading this book, Spiritual Theology by Jordan Aumann.
Mm-hmm.
Dominican, right? There's one chapter on temperament, and that was my first introduction to it. And I was like going to Art, look at this, look what he says. It's like kind of similar to the experience you had but it was like, wow, I didn't know this. And he was like, oh yeah, I knew this. But it was kind of like way back, and from his training. But like the thing that was most revelatory to both of us was the fact that this is a way of understanding our personalities, that it has this long Catholic tradition. See, that was the thing. Like we had known about many other things, like Myers-Briggs or whatever, but this has a Catholic history. And so it was like, wow, this is amazing.
So when I was working at the clinic, I started giving talks on it. One parish asked for a talk, and then another and another.
Yeah.
Before you knew it, we had a pretty thick file on temperaments, temperament for kids, temperament for spouses and stuff. And then Laraine, ever the cleric, ever seeing an opportunity for growth and stuff, said, I think we might have a book here.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah.
And then a summary of the temperaments. You want to start?
Oh.
Claire?
Yeah. Do you want a quick, brief, summary of the 4?
Yes. Why don't you start with what they are? Let's start with what the temperaments are and these Catholic roots, because maybe somebody doesn't know and they desperately need to. So let's start with that, and then we'll go into the 4.
Yeah. What is temperament? Yeah.
Probably the best quick definition of temperament is how you tend to react in certain situations, or ideally how you tend to respond in certain situations. So
nice.
We go to a party, we don't know anybody. Lorraine's excited to meet new people, look at all the great people I meet, and me being introverted going, how did I get invited to this? What am I doing here? What that? So that's the response. That's a temperament response right there. So it's not your whole personality.
Right.
I mean, your whole personality would have your education, the repercussions of your decisions, your moral and spiritual
your
growth
culture,
and all that, your culture,
your
birth order, and all that
birth
stuff.
order, so many things.
And temperaments is part of that.
Part of that.
But just so we want to be clear, when we're talking about your temperament, we're not talking about a trait that boxes you in.
We're not putting people in boxes.
No box, no. But it's a tendency.
It's a tendency.
And it's good to know the
react.
tendency to react that way. And then you fast forward, 20, 25 years later, I enjoy going to parties. I've overcome that. And most of my friends that I have, I met at a party.
Right. Well, except we don't say that you change your temperament, though. It's more that he's grown in other ways. So it's temperament is nature. It's God's gift to us to kind of kickstart our personalities. It's like the building blocks of our personality, but it's not our whole personality. So there's plenty of room for growth, So he, over the years, has learned to be sociable, and it's
party
also
animal now.
Right, not exactly. But still, like the introvert, we would say, tends to derive their more energy from solitude than the extrovert. The extrovert derives energy. One party is not enough. We could go to 2 or 3 parties. But the thing that's interesting is it's like we can't overstate it that we're not trying to put people in boxes. Really, it's just the building blocks of your personality, the tendency to react, and in fact, you kind of put yourself more in a box when you don't know about it, because then you're going to have these knee-jerk reactions that actually are not necessarily the best reaction in any given situation. We want to make the most prudent response to a situation, which may not be what our temperament kind of dictates.
So that's actually what I was thinking when you were saying not putting people in boxes. It's actually it's liberating. It's the opposite of a box. It's liberating to know these pieces of yourself and to have the freedom to choose. I love how you made that distinction between reacting and responding. You have the opportunity to respond accordingly, right? Like I know that it's only fun if everyone's having fun. And so if my husband's not like super enthusiastic about something, my inclination is to be like, come on. Like we're only going to do it if you're really pumped. But he's probably not going to get pumped. So like I can change, I can change how I respond to his not wanting to come to this party with me, and we can go from there. So it's so silly that people feel like it puts you in boxes when in reality, this is the opposite. It's liberating to know these pieces of yourself. And then you have the opportunity to build virtue on top of it. Right. Not that going to parties is more virtuous than not going to parties. It's just like, there are situations though where there is virtue opportunity when it comes to your temperament.
And every temperament has natural strengths, natural virtues, and virtues that are going to be a little bit more difficult to acquire.
Absolutely. Yeah. I heard it said, so this is something that sister said at this retreat, and I don't know if she got it from you or not, but she said that authentic holiness, like, so if you look at the Virgin Mary, you wouldn't know which temperament she is because she had developed virtue across the board. And so she basically has virtues from all four of them. Is that from you guys?
Yeah, well,
I don't know if it's from us, but we definitely agree with that.
We say that about saints. So
Yep.
saints can't tell what their original temperament is unless you go back and you read the story of their life and you see what they were like as a child.
Cough, Saint Therese, cough.
Yeah, I know,
you were gonna say it.
Or, Saint Therese, her mother said you could put her in the cellar all day and she would not change her mind. She was so stubborn. Okay, choleric maybe, but that virtue actually that characteristic was actually part of her holiness because she didn't change, but she directed it. So she became heroic in following God's will. So she was very, she was stubbornly, if you want to say, holding on to God's will, but anyway, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go into the four, because if people are listening and they're like, I don't even know what choleric is. Okay, so please go into the four.
Choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholic. And the choleric has we talked about reactions, right? So the quick, intense, long-lived reactions. The phlegmatic is the exact opposite. They tend to be very the low-key reactions. So the choleric would be your kind of take charge person, your natural born leader, very determined, energetic, forceful, confident, love to take charge in every situation, even if they don't know anything about the situation that they're in, And then the phlegmatic is the exact opposite. So phlegmatic, do you want to do phlegmatic?
Yeah, I'll do. Phlegmatic, choleric wants to kind of take over, lead, take charge. Phlegmatic wants to blend in, doesn't want to call attention to himself or herself. Is more interested in just being a team player. Cholerics kind of love conflict. They instill conflict. They're not afraid of it. They stir things up. We always think of like Franklin Delano Roosevelt liked to always have the Republicans over for breakfast so we could start off the day with a good fight. We want to have a good fight with the Republicans every morning. So here we go. So he was energized by that. Phlegmatics do not like conflict. It's one of the things that I'm a phlegmatic, have to overcome is the fear of the cross, fear of the conflict. So that's a difference right there. But very cooperative temperament, team player. We always say to people, if you don't have a phlegmatic child yet, keep having a baby till you get one. Because you want at least one of the kids that does what you say. You want a child. That's us. Phlegmatics are compliant. Then the next temperament might be the sanguine and melancholic. The most outgoing temperament is the sanguine. Raised, enthusiasm. I love people. I love doing things. I love music. I love movies. I love blah, blah, blah. I have more hits on Facebook than you do and da-da-da.
Quick, intense, but short-lived reactions. Yeah, so making them like very enthusiastic and optimistic and always willing to start a new activity, a new project. Yay! Oh, yay! It's Lent! Oh, boo! It's Lent. No, I just wrote an article on the different temperaments reacting to Lent, and sanguine is like, yay, this time it's not going to be like last time when I forgot what I decided to do, give up. This time I'm really going to stick to it.
I just literally last night, I was like, Ross, Lent is on February 22nd. So we're due with a baby in the middle of March. And I was like, Lent is February 22nd. We got to get ready. Like, let's figure out what we're going to do as like a family and a couple and be mindful. And he was like, that's like February 22nd. That's far away. It's so funny. You just use that example. That just happened at my house last night.
That's so funny. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, but they tend to be forgetful, so they
Yep.
start projects and maybe don't finish the project. So perseverance is a little tricky for sanguines, and maybe a little self-control can sometimes be. They love to be the center of attention, love to be talking, love to. As you said, people, it's about everybody being happy. And, sometimes that, the melancholic, the opposite temperament, is like, what are you, just a cheerleader? It's like, do you ever, do you ever think things through deeply? So
Yeah,
the
one of the
melancholic is the
melancholic
left.
favorite lines is, "I'm the only adult in the room." That's
Yeah.
No, no, I'm not pessimistic. I'm realistic.
Yeah.
Oh my
Thank God
gosh, you guys.
looking at the facts. Thank
You're-
goodness somebody, me, the melancholic, is really kind of watching, reading of the fine print,
Yeah.
and not rushing to decisions.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the
Looking at the
sanguine
budget.
starts off real enthusiastic, and then kind of melancholics start off kind of a little suspicious of new things.
Yeah.
Do we need to really change? Are you sure you got the details right? But then when they get aboard, they're totally loyal, and they finish and they complete things. So
Yeah. So they strong on perseverance.
strong and perseverance. So one
Yeah.
starts slow, ends strong. One starts strong, but without kind of being renewed, can kind of peter out. So those are the four temperaments.
Yeah.
Sanguine is most extroverted, melancholic the most
introverted. Yeah.
temperaments.
You guys, I'm so happy right now. It's like you're at my kitchen table. It's like you're at my kitchen table looking at my family. That's why these are so cool, and why I'm so excited about them, and why I think they're so important for people to know, because it could cause a conflict, except,
Right.
We know that this is just who we are, and God gave us these gifts, and we are responsible for figuring out how to cultivate them, right, and love each other through them. So let's talk for a bit about how knowing your temperament can help you in your day-to-day life, just as a person, right? A lot of my people are single still and discerning what God wants for them. So how can this be helpful?
Yeah, well, I wanted to mention at the outset, sorry,
Go for
interrupted.
it, Mrs. Claire. Go for it.
But the whole idea, I think it's original sin, that we tend to think that the way I respond is the way everybody ought to respond. And so then when
Ooh.
you don't respond the way what I think you ought to, then I judge you harshly. So we attribute ill will to it. And that's the source of the conflict. So for example, like when, we were, new parents, and I had like little kids running around, and I'm at home all day stuck with the kids who can't talk or whatever. And then Art comes home, and as soon as he walks in the door, he's met with a barrage of me talking. And it's like, let's go do something. Let's go, he's barely caught a breath and stepped over the door threshold, and I say, let's go do something, let's go out to dinner tonight. Oh wait, we've got the kids, let's have a picnic, let's do a picnic. No, I know, let's go, let's have a movie night at home, and we'll just order in, we'll get Chinese food, we'll do. How come you're not saying anything? What, are you mad at me? Or no, what's wrong with you? Something wrong with you? No, you know what I mean? It's like, so
Yes, I do.
I'm attributing negative things, and basically he just was thinking, like he was processing. He doesn't respond immediately to what I thinking he ought to, attributed something negative, and that could start a fight, especially with couples. So that's what I wanted to say, is like, knowing your temperament is really helpful when you're meeting new people. You can then not jump immediately to the negative interpretation, right?
Yeah, it's like you said earlier, Elizabeth. So you tend to react. Your temperament tends to be a reactive part of you.
Yeah.
Like Laraine, the example she gave, it's a great example. Just really wanted to talk to me no matter what. And my thing is like, well, I need to kind of enter in slowly into this new phase. It's called the home thing. So I'm kind of a slow burn. She's a fast burn. So part of what temperament does, first thing, like Laraine said, and this is invaluable in marriage, it takes away that default setting of blaming the other when they're not like you. And you really need to get a handle on that in every relationship. That is, to not go negative, don't work out right away. And just putting a pause there. Because a lot of times marriage therapy is just really trying to introduce a pause, a reflective moment here. So to turn from reaction to response. And I think that's one of the main things about temperament. And then So Laraine can alter her temperament a little bit, maybe like say,
Right.
give me 5 minutes. But on my end,
Yeah, you.
I can sit in the driveway and go, okay, Lorraine's been home alone all day. I'm going to see the four kids are going to jump on me. I got to be ready for that. I got to be ready for that. Dad's not been home for a long time, so
Yeah.
I can do that. And so on both cases, we can, knowing our temperament,
We can choose. Yeah.
choose to respond differently.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but so turning your reactions into prudent responses is a key part of any relationship, and temperaments make that a lot, I think, more easier and facilitate
understanding
that.
the temperament.
It stops
Yeah.
that immediate negative
Right.
bias, at least puts it on pause, at least kind of cautions it, and then it leaves some room for a new response, a better
Yeah.
response. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Oh, that was so beautifully said. And such a good example of how you can develop the virtue, right? So
Yeah.
Laraine could recognize he needs 5 minutes when he walks in the door. Kiddos, we're going to give daddy 5 minutes. When the timer goes off, you can go say hi. Or you can choose to sit in the car and prep yourself, right? Either there's no right answer. Like y'all just can decide what works for your family.
Exactly.
But
Just
that's
to
such
make
a good
small
example
change.
of the virtue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
small change, and
Yeah.
so-
Exactly.
And that just defeating that immediate negative interpretation, or at least
Right.
pausing it, is so important
Yeah.
in any
Right.
relationship. Yeah.
Right. We had a friend whose boyfriend one time, he was out on a business trip, right?
Yeah.
And so and she said, I hope you're going to call, when you're gone, because this is the first time we've been apart for a while or whatever. And he called, but he called from a bar. And she's like, she hears all the noise in the background, and she's like, "What? You're calling from a bar?" And she, being melancholic, attributed that to a very negative attribution there. So she was mad at him for calling. And he's like, "But I called. I did what you said." And I left the bar to make the phone. This was back in the day, maybe when they had I don't know. Well, it doesn't matter. But the point being, we don't have to. We try to shift the focus, maybe widen the focus. Actually, the
Right.
broader get a bigger picture where maybe we would have taken the narrow view. He's calling from a bar. That's horrible. To let's look at the wider picture.
Yeah. And temperaments help with that. Broaden the horizon.
Yeah.
Look at the context a little bit. Again, it's a great not only stopgap to immediate negative response,
Right.
but it also can open up a very positive, healthful response. Like, oh my gosh, I know how much you love being with people. Thanks for breaking away from the crowd and giving me a call. How about when you get to your room later, you give me another call? But that's so great that you remember.
Instead,
that you remember.
Instead, they broke up over it.
Oh, no.
And, you want to almost you want to counsel the kind of sanguine personality to say, you want to be a little more sensitive on that stuff. And then you want to say to the melancholic, he did call, he will call again. So it gives a pause. So you don't get in that negative mindset, which can damage relationships so severely.
Yeah.
Y'all, that application is so wise. So I'm also a marriage and family therapist, and I can totally see how, even that one application, that immediate negative reaction that you're working to overcome can have tremendous impacts on, the ripple effects of that are so powerful. I love that application of the temperaments. So as a person who's still single, you can practice this on anybody, on your mom, on your boss, on your siblings, on your friends, because it is so necessary when you're, in marriage with one person forever. But it's a really good, there are endless opportunities to practice this, recognizing the negative response that you have and tying that to the element of your temperament, and then getting yourself to a point where you can respond instead of just reacting. That seems like a great application for singles.
Oh yeah,
that's
fantastic!
a
It's a
really
great
good
time
point.
to practice it before you get married.
Yeah, that also gets you out of what you just described as getting into growth mode.
Yeah.
Like today I'm going to practice listening better. Today I'm going to practice being a little more assertive. Or today I'm going to ask people about their day and not just tell them about mine. So you go through the world and you'll have multiple opportunities to do that.
Right.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And then you get into a growth mindset, which takes you out of the threat mode. When you're in threat mode, you get on your heels and you get your dukes up. But you get in growth mode, you go, wow, I'm checking out at the store today. I'm just going to ask how her day's going and really listen as opposed to what I normally do. Or I'm going to practice. I'm going to practice these new skills.
Yeah. Exactly. Sometimes it takes a lot of practice. So yeah,
First saying
like
wins.
for the cleric, for me to not respond by arguing is like when I
Mm.
caught myself. Actually, I think a coworker helped me one time. She was like, I thought I was, just debating very virtuously, let's say. I mean, if there is such a thing. But anyway, with my boss, right? Like, that's a mistake. But my coworker goes, Laraine, why do you always escalate? And I go, oh, is that what I do? I didn't realize
Ooh.
I was escalating. And so, like, really, like, you learn from these moments, I think. And, we all have these moments. They're little God's, the Holy Spirit is giving us a chance to learn how to respond better. So, yeah, a lot of
I
practice
love that.
needed for me.
Perfect. So one of the there's so many helpful things about the work that you guys have done, but one of the things that stuck out really strongly to me is at the end of the Temperament God Gave You, you have the pairings. So like how these pairs of temperaments will go together, like what happens. And so springboarding off of that or off of any of your experience, in all of the years you've been doing this. So when someone's discerning marriage, right? My target audience are people who are trying to figure out if God's calling them to marriage, and then they're dating and they're trying to figure out if God's calling them to this person. So kind of from either that springboard in that book or all of your experience, what are some things that would be helpful to my target audience to know about their own, about the other person's? Like, how much should that influence their decision of their choice of a spouse, their choice to, continue going on dates with someone, their dating relationship in general? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's important. There are some things that are really important on that, and some things not as important. I don't think you say I'm only going to marry somebody with a certain temperament. I think that would be too narrow.
Right.
I don't. Now, you
Right.
would, however, probably look at someone who would respect your temperament and that you could respect theirs. But but actually marrying someone with a different temperament is probably more a plus than I mean, we're totally different.
Yeah, we're complete opposite.
Totally.
Yeah.
But
But it could be anyway.
But there would have to be built in the notion of, even though I'm a little bit more outgoing than he is, I really sense that he respects the way I am, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's a key thing there. But I don't think there's too many values that must be the same. I would say, though, maybe what your religion is, will we have children or not, how are we going to raise our kids, maybe those kind of things you want to be pretty much you want to be really pretty much
Close.
on page, or at least very radically
close.
respectful, or at least respectful and maybe even congruent. But anyhow, I think those things should be discussed, and you want to find common ground there. But you certainly wouldn't limit yourself to marrying someone just with the same temperament. That would be
Right. No, for sure.
However, would just want to be sure that. I'll give you an example. Like I like NBA basketball games, and Laraine and I have only been married 46 years, and we've never watched a basketball game together. Not even. She'll come down and ask us a question that's kind of nutty and leave and
ask a nutty
But I've
question.
ever once.
Which way is the ball going?
She's never even once said, "Why are you watching this stupid basketball? What's that all about?" She's never said that. Not even 46 years, though she never really watches it. And Laraine owns a lot of cookbooks. I'm looking at a lot of them right now in our kitchen, and I've never even opened them. I just pay for them. I never open them and look at them.
And you eat what she cooks.
And
I eat. Yeah,
There you
I
go.
definitely benefit more from that than she does from the basketball game. But that's so we don't have to have the same interests. You have other interests that have not much to do. But there should be respect for those interests. I think those are the kind of things you're looking for. Do you respect me as a person? Am I able to respect you?
Right.
And that we have some core beliefs that are pretty similar. Then
I think too that rather than I think a number of young women that I've talked with kind of recently would sometimes have a temptation to make a list, and I want this characteristic and this characteristic and this characteristic, and it's like I don't think the list is like necessarily a great way to start out, because then as soon as they meet somebody, they're kind of like checking off items from the list. Which it's really, I think at first you want to be friends with a person. You know what I mean? Like you see if there's a basis for friendship, because you're going to be friends for a long time. And so whatever you use in your, how do you when you decide to choose your friends, what are those features? And generally it's the things that you have in common, but it doesn't have to be. But it's more like serious values that you have in common, like you were saying, religion, things like that. Yeah.
I love that idea.
Radical.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. You said radical respect is one of the most important.
Different, but it should be radical, some radical respect on
Yeah.
things. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that idea of looking for someone the way you would look for a friend.
Yeah.
I had never heard it phrased exactly that way. I absolutely 100% am on board with the notion that you guys should be each other's closest friends, of course, because
Right.
that's the relation, that element of your relationship lasts forever. But I hadn't thought about when you're picking someone, like think about how you pick your friends and kind of go from there. That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the only big red flag when it comes to temperaments is if the other person doesn't respect your temperament. Like you could be as different as night and day, but if there's no respect there, then that becomes a problem. Whereas just the differences is not necessarily a bad thing, and you even said it could actually be a good thing.
Right, exactly.
Keeps things spicy. You didn't use that language, but it keeps things spicy.
No, but that's absolutely
It's really
true.
good. It's a really good point,
Yeah, and we're kind of like building a team. Once you have kids, as I'm sure you know, it's like it's almost like you have a team there. We've got people from different temperaments, so they all have different. Like I turn to my oldest daughter, who's a melancholic. I'm like, where do I put the furniture in the room? I mean, she has got an eye for detail, like you wouldn't believe. She just she'll come in and she'll go, oh my gosh, you got the bed facing the wrong way, but I mean, like, really? Oh, I had no idea. And like she has all the details, and then for each one has like a different talent or virtue that they bring to the table, and so I feel like it's God's way of bringing us all together and helping us work as a team, and so it's kind of a wonderful thing. Did I get off topic on that? The question was about singles, right? So about and Gottman talks about how you don't want to the four horsemen of the apocalypse, like once you start getting really, what is the word, contempt in the relationship, that's like, ooh, really bad. Poison. So you never want to go there. So.
And I think any of the temperaments can have contempt in there, in the way that they present. The contempt would look different based on what temperament it is, like how you present it, but any of them can have it. So absolutely.
Right.
Have we talked about the Gottmans on the show? I love the Gottmans.
Oh, yeah.
My people who are watching know that I love the Gottmans. I don't think I mentioned that to you. I didn't tell them to say that, you guys. The Gottmans are a real thing.
No, we love the Gottmans too. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Because one of the things they point out is in every relationship, you can have points where you disagree with the other person. You may even have a fight. You may even have an argument. That
Absolutely.
doesn't mean it's all because contempt hasn't entered in there. Just because you had an argument, you can disagree. Yeah.
Well, like, for example, I really respect the Gottmans a lot, and they have a lot of great experiments and experience and research, and they're really great. But I don't agree with everything they say. I take a exception to some of their sexual ways of looking at things that I don't think is research-based. So there's a good example of following the Gottman principle, which is that you can look at the things that are common ground that you like a lot, and you don't have to like everything they say or do to still
you don't have to agree with it. Yeah.
To have radical respect or agree, to have radical respect for them, and that there's a place for them that is really an asset as a professional therapist, but also just in being married. Yeah, that's a good example. You have to take everything in, because that all or nothing thinking is rarely going to work.
In a relationship, you're talking about singles too, like being open to influence. I was just thinking that's a really good temperament point for the choleric who doesn't want to be open to influence, but because they think they're always right. But all the temperaments can have those moments probably. But being open to influence is not saying I have to agree with you on every single detail. Like that's the person with the checklist. It's like, oh, he disagreed with me on Chinese food. That's it. You're gone. No. But I mean, the point being, you just want to. Well, tell me about that. Why do you love X, Y, or Z so much? Why is that important to you? And you become curious, and you become more interested in the other person, and you become more empathic when you do that, rather than, well, that is just crazy. I mean, that's the stupidest idea I ever heard. That you want to eliminate that kind of thinking, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So the last question that I have, I always like to ask my guests for a practical tip. I think there are a lot of people who, when they're discerning and they're in that season of discernment, there is this inaction that people are tempted to. And it's easier sometimes to keep it all up in your mind of like, we're going to discern, but then there's no like active steps. So I love practical tips. I definitely want everyone to read your book if they haven't read it. So that's one practical tip. You don't have to say that. I will say it for you. The Temperament God Gave You, so good. I'll put a link to get this book. But do you guys have a practical tip that anyone who's listening to this episode today can turn off this episode and can go do it that will help them on their path to discerning marriage? So anything related to what we've talked about today.
What's practical tip?
I think one that kind of came up earlier, I thought was really good, was to be radically respectful. So let's say you take your best friend or your spouse or your oldest kid or one of your youngest kid, and you take them and say, where's an area we're rubbing each other the wrong way? What's an area that's kind of irritating me or whatever? Like, she tends to be late or he tends to put his homework out late. Is to pick that area and then find a way, challenge yourself to find a way to love some aspect of that. Love some aspect of it. So just it's primarily for your own growth, but also for the relationship growth. So with the kid who's late a lot, you might go, I like the way you really focus on things before you transition out of stuff. I like the way you really put your focus on that, because that's really important. Because probably one of the biggest issues these days is distraction. People are so distracted and stuff, and I think that's really neat. So I know I've been kind of harping on you need to get stuff done faster and quicker, but I just want to make sure you understand that I really like the way you really focus and dedicate yourself to stuff. So I'm trying to overcome that thing between us. I'm overcoming that thing between us by reframing a positive aspect to what I'm seeing. I'm challenging myself to respond differently and not just react impatiently.
Right. And then in the discerning thing, that's also could be a temperament. There could be a temperament issue that you could question yourself about. In other words, if I'm taking a really super long time to discern and I keep putting this relationship on hold, is it because I'm phlegmatic? Is it because I'm melancholic? Can't decide? Yeah. Because I have to keep researching. Like, the melancholics will research forever. And, it takes a long time. So you might want to challenge yourself on that point. And likewise, the choleric and the sanguine, do I want to marry the guy, like, after I met him, just like we went on 2 dates, like, let me challenge myself on that, in that respect. Like, just question if I'm moving too quickly or I'm too decisive, I'm too controlling in the relationship. So question yourself. I mean, it's hard to do, but when you know your temperament, then you can just kind of take a look at it and say, let's just look at that aspect of my temperament.
And when you get in growth mode, you allow yourself to not just react, but to respond.
Right.
That's something you brought up earlier, highlighted. I think
respond. Yeah.
Responding is how responding differently. John the Cross says, you want to get to a different country? You want to get to a different country? You have to take a different path. Yeah. So responding as opposed to just reacting is going on a different path, and that can strengthen yourself and your relationships.
Yeah.
I love that, y'all. Thank you. Thank you. I cannot believe this is happening. I cannot believe I'm talking to you guys. It is so cool because you had such an impact on my life. And I mean, you wrote a book, you don't know me, but I know you, you've had such an impact on my life. And it's just so cool. Like, y'all, give God your dreams. I say this all the time. Give God your dreams. He will make your dreams so much more incredible than you could have ever imagined. So I cannot thank you enough for saying yes to this. Thanks for saying yes to going to Kendra's. So Catholic All Year, we had Kendra on an Advent, you guys. She has a market, and that's where Laraine and I met in person. And I went up to Kendra and I was like, Kendra, is that Laraine Bennett? And she was like, yes. And I'm nerding out. And she introduced me because she was like, let me make a smooth introduction for you, because I was over there like sweating in a corner. I was like, oh my gosh, Laraine Bennett is here. So anyway, thank you so much for all the work you guys have done.
For having us on. This is amazing. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you guys. And thank you all for listening. We know your time is so valuable and so precious, and we're so grateful that you gave some to us today. So until next time, stay close to the heart of Jesus and be not afraid. Bye.